In the year 4089, the galaxy had become a place of peace, filled with treaties, advanced space stations, and endless diversity of alien species. Among the many races, the Veiled Ones stood out as one of the most enigmatic. They hailed from the distant planet Xeria, a place of shining crystal cities and vast fields of light. The Veiled Ones were an ancient and proud species, known for their grace, their wisdom, and their peculiar custom of wearing silver masks at all times. No one, not even their closest allies, had ever seen the face of a Veiled One. The masks, glimmering and flawless, were a symbol of their deep-rooted beliefs about identity, beauty, and the power of the mind. The princess of the Veiled Ones, Valari, was a being of extraordinary beauty and intellect. She was the future ruler of her people, the one destined to lead them to a new age of prosperity. But there was one crucial element that had to happen before she could ascend the throne: the bonding ceremony. This was no ordinary union. It was an ancient tradition, one that required the princess to form a deep and unbreakable connection with another individual. The catch? The bonding could not happen through looks or physical attraction. The Veiled Ones believed that love, loyalty, and leadership must begin with the soul and the mind, not the body. To form a bond, the princess had to connect mentally, spiritually, and emotionally with someone. But there was a unique rule to this process. No one could bond with her unless they had agreed to never see her face. It was a test, a measure of genuine connection beyond appearance. If someone could bond with her without ever knowing what she truly looked like, then their bond was considered pure and true. To many, this was an impossible challenge. No one could imagine loving someone they couldn't even see. After all, how could someone truly connect with another without seeing their face? It was a concept that many found hard to accept. Over the years, many had tried. Suitors, diplomats, and warriors from across the galaxy had come to Xeria, hoping to bond with the princess. They were often greeted by her presence, shrouded in the mystery of her silver mask, and then told the rule that no one could see her face until the bond was formed. The suitors would hesitate, then walk away. Some tried to find ways around the rule. Some even mocked it, calling it a trick, a test that no one could pass. But no one stayed, and none succeeded. All left, unable to accept the strange and unyielding tradition. Then, one day, a human arrived. Jace Carter, a man from Earth, had no idea why he was chosen. He wasn't wealthy or influential. He wasn't royalty, nor did he have any special connections with the Veiled Ones. But somehow, he had been selected by the Galactic Council to travel to Xeria and attempt the impossible, to bond with Princess Valerie. Jace was curious about the Veiled Ones, fascinated by their customs, and, in a way, he felt a sense of destiny pulling him toward them. He had heard the rumors about the princess and her strange, unbreakable rule, but he never imagined he would be standing in the grand palace of Xeria, facing the silver gates of the palace garden, waiting to meet the princess in person. The moment Jace entered the garden, he felt an overwhelming sense of serenity. The trees glowed with soft golden light, and the air shimmered with the energy of the ancient city. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in, when the palace gates slowly opened, and there she was. The princess, shrouded in mystery, stepped forward. Her long, flowing robes sparkled like stardust, and her movements were graceful, as if she were a part of the very air itself. She was beautiful, there was no doubt about that. Yet, her face remained hidden behind the silver mask, as it had for generations of her people. Jace couldn't help but feel a sense of awe, though he also felt something else. A strange pull, a connection that he couldn't explain. The princess stopped a few paces away from him, her presence almost overwhelming. She spoke in a soft, melodious voice that seemed to echo in the air. "You understand the rule, human?" Her tone was calm, but there was a sharpness in her words, as if she had heard this question too many times before. Jace stood tall, his heart racing, but he met her eyes with unwavering confidence. He had come here for a reason, and he wasn't about to back down now. He nodded, his voice steady. I do. I'm not here to see your face. I'm here to know you, your mind, your heart, your soul. There was a brief silence, as if the words had taken the princess by surprise. Her gaze flickered, and the guards behind her stiffened, unsure of how to react. No one had ever said that before. No one had ever come without the desire to see her face. And for a moment, even the princess herself seemed unsure, caught between the rules she had known her whole life and the unexpected bravery of this human before her. And then, something happened. The silver mask she wore began to glow, softly at first, and then brighter and brighter until it pulsed with a gentle golden light. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Jace watched, mesmerized, as the mask responded to his words, as if it were alive, aware of his intent. The princess stepped forward again, closer this time. You are the first to not hesitate, she said, almost to herself. No one has ever said what you have said. I'm not here for a game or a challenge, Jace replied, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm here because I believe that true connection is about more than what we see. It's about who we are, deep inside. Valerie studied him for a moment longer, as if searching for any hint of insincerity. But all she found was calm resolve. She took a deep breath and gave a slight nod, signaling the start of the ceremony. As the guards stepped back and the sacred ritual began, Jace couldn't help but wonder if he had just made the right choice. He had never been one to follow tradition, but this felt like something more than just a test. It felt like the beginning of something profound. And so, the bonding ceremony began in earnest, with no one knowing what the outcome would be, not even the princess. What no one expected, however, was that this time the bond would be unlike any other. The scene shifted in an instant. Jace Carter found himself standing inside the Chamber of Unity, a place few outside the Veiled Ones had ever seen. The room was unlike anything he had experienced before. Its walls were composed of glowing crystals, each one pulsing with an inner light, creating a soft, otherworldly glow that bathed the entire chamber in a serene, almost ethereal ambiance. Floating around the room were small, delicate orbs that hummed softly, as if alive, giving the space an air of ancient power and mystery. The air itself felt heavier here, thick with the weight of tradition and the power of rituals long upheld by the Veiled Ones. For a moment, Jace stood still, absorbing the sight, overwhelmed by the stark beauty that surrounded him. The princess, Valari, stood opposite him, still cloaked in her shimmering robes and silver mask, though now there was a deeper sense of stillness about her. As she moved toward him, her presence seemed to take on a more intense quality. Every step was measured, graceful, as though she glided over the floor, her robes trailing behind her like mist. It was as if she didn't quite walk on the ground, but floated just above it, the very fabric of space seeming to bend in response to her movements. Jace could feel the weight of her gaze even though he couldn't see her eyes. There was something about her, a quiet strength, a calm that radiated from her being. As she approached, the soft hum of the room seemed to grow louder, filling Jace's ears with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Valerie reached out, and the air around them seemed to vibrate with energy. She extended her hand toward a glowing orb sitting at the center of the room. This was no ordinary object. It was a tool of immense significance, a sacred artifact that had been used in the bonding ceremony for centuries. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, and Jace felt an instinctive pull toward it. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for it, and as their fingers touched the orb, a wave of energy surged through him, sending a ripple of sensations across his body. He felt his heart race, and for a moment, his thoughts seemed to blur. Place your hands on the orb. Valerie instructed in her soft, melodic voice. The words felt like a gentle breeze, calming yet forceful. Jace nodded and followed her instruction. The instant his palms pressed against the orb's smooth surface, the world around him began to dissolve. The familiar sights and sounds of the chamber faded away, replaced by a vast open space, an empty, boundless void where only he and Valerie remained. He could hear the distant echo of voices, a faint murmuring, but they seemed far away, as though he were listening from the other side of a great distance. Then, without warning, the world shifted again. Jace stood on a grassy hillside, bathed in the soft glow of an alien sun. The wind was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of unknown flowers and the distant sound of rushing water. He looked around, confused. Was this a dream? Was this a memory? Before he could answer his own question, a figure appeared in the distance, a young girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old. She was alone, her small figure silhouetted against the setting sun. It didn't take long for Jace to realize that the girl was Valerie, though she looked nothing like the princess standing before him. She was younger, her face not yet hidden behind the mask, her expression open and innocent. Valerie turned and looked at him, her eyes wide with curiosity, though there was something else in them, something darker, a sorrow that she would one day come to understand. She held out her hand to him, but Jace couldn't move. The scene shifted once more, and now they were inside a vast, gleaming palace. Valerie, older now, stood at the edge of a grand balcony, gazing out over the endless expanse of Zeria's fields. Her back was straight, her posture regal. But there was something in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hands clenched at her sides. She was alone, as she had always been. She had been raised in the palace, surrounded by beauty and wealth, yet no one had ever truly been there for her. Jace could feel the loneliness radiating from her. He could feel the weight of her duty pressing down on her, the burden of being born into a role she had never asked for. Her life had been one of isolation, her thoughts constantly trained on the throne she would one day inherit. Her days had been filled with lessons, ceremonies, and expectations. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, there was a part of her that longed for something more. A connection, something real, someone who would see her for who she truly was, not just as the future queen. As the memory played out, Jace began to understand her in a way he never had before. This wasn't the Princess of Zeria he had been told about. This was a young woman, caught between her duty and her desires, trapped by the very traditions that had shaped her. And though she had always worn the mask, both literally and metaphorically, it was clear to Jace that she had never truly learned how to open up to another person. She had never learned how to be vulnerable. The scene shifted again, and this time Jace saw himself. He was a child, much younger than he was now, sitting at a dinner table with his family. The laughter of his mother filled the air, and his father's voice could be heard telling stories about the stars. There was joy in the air, warmth, love. But then came the shadow, the war. Jace could feel the crushing weight of it, the absence of his brother. He had seen his brother go off to battle, seen him leave with a promise to return, and then the silence. The painful silence that followed when his brother never came back. Jace had spent years blaming himself, questioning what he could have done differently, haunted by the image of his brother's face, never quite understanding that he wasn't to blame. The guilt had eaten at him for years, and it still lingered, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. Valerie's voice echoed in the emptiness of their shared space. "You let your pain live. You don't run from it." Jace could feel her presence beside him, her words both comforting and unsettling. She had seen his pain, felt it, understood it. And as he stood there, surrounded by memories of loss and regret, he realized that he wasn't alone in his suffering. Valerie had her own burdens, her own scars, hidden behind her mask. For the first time, he felt as though they were equals. Two souls, connected by their pain, their loneliness, their longing for something more. But he didn't run, and he wouldn't. "I didn't leave you," he said softly, looking at her in the endless void of shared memories. "I couldn't reach you, but I never stopped trying." The words seemed to echo in the stillness. And for a moment, Jace wasn't sure if it was the memory or the present, but as he spoke, the world around him began to shift again. The colors of the void faded, replaced by the familiar sights of the Chamber of Unity. He was back in the real world, but something had changed. Something deep inside him had shifted. And as his hands slowly released from the glowing orb, he knew that this connection, this bond, had already begun. And yet, Valeri stood silently before him, her mask still in place, her gaze unreadable. But Jace didn't feel the need to hide anymore. He had seen her heart, and she had seen his. The bonding had begun. In the days that followed the moment in the Chamber of Unity, Jace found himself caught between two worlds. The experiences he had shared with Valeri were like nothing he had ever known, yet they felt so real, so visceral. They had connected, in a way that transcended the physical realm, sharing memories, emotions, and truths that were buried deep within them both. Every day, he felt an invisible thread pulling him toward her, a sense of longing that seemed to intensify the longer he stayed away. At the same time, the weight of the bond, the ancient ritual that had bound them together, loomed over him. He wasn't sure how to navigate this new reality. His mind spun with uncertainty, but his heart told him that there was something there, something undeniable. Valerie, too, seemed to have changed. Since the ceremony, she no longer wore the mask as often. It wasn't just a physical object anymore. It had become a symbol of her isolation, something she had been hiding behind for far too long. And now, in the quiet moments between their interactions, she would sometimes sit in solitude, her hands resting gently over her heart as if contemplating the bond they had forged. Jace noticed that the princess had become more introspective, her movements more deliberate, her silence heavier. It was as though she was coming to terms with a part of herself that had always been locked away. Her duties, the expectations placed upon her, still weighed on her shoulders. But there was something else now, a flicker of hope, a spark of something more. One day, as Jace wandered the royal palace, he was drawn to a quiet garden hidden in the farthest corner of the grounds. The garden was a place of peace, its atmosphere calming and inviting. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers, the colors of the blooms so vivid they seemed to glow in the dim light. Jace found a bench under a flowering tree and sat there, letting the peaceful atmosphere settle over him. He didn't know how long he had been sitting when he felt the familiar presence beside him. Without turning, he knew it was Valeri. She didn't speak at first, but simply sat down beside him, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was setting, casting its golden light over the distant hills. For a long while, neither of them said a word. It was a strange comfort, the silence between them. It was as if the bond they had formed in the Chamber of Unity had given them a deeper understanding of one another, one that didn't require words to communicate. They had already shared so much, and now, in the quiet of the garden, they were simply allowing each other to exist in the same space. Finally, Valerie spoke, her voice softer than Jace had ever heard it before. "I have been taught my whole life that my role is to be a queen, a leader. But no one ever taught me how to be me." She paused, her gaze drifting downward. "I thought the mask would protect me. I thought it would keep me safe from the world and its expectations. But now I wonder if it has only kept me trapped." There was a vulnerability in her words that Jace had never imagined hearing from the strong, distant princess. He felt a deep sense of empathy for her, knowing the pressure she had always been under. the weight of an entire world's expectations, was enough to break anyone, let alone someone as young as she was. Jace didn't know what to say at first. What could he say to someone who had lived her whole life in such isolation, with no one to truly understand her? He could only speak from his own experience. "I get it," he said softly. "I never knew what it felt like to be constantly expected to be someone else. But I know what it's like to carry something heavy inside, something you can't talk about. For me, it was my brother. I always thought if I could just save him, if I could just do more, maybe he would have come back. But now I understand that it wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who chose for him to leave." He looked at her then, his gaze steady. I think you're doing the same thing. You're carrying all these expectations, all these roles that people have put on you, and you've been trying to live up to them. But you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to wear the mask if you don't want to." Valerie turned to him then, her eyes wide. There was something almost disbelieving in her expression. She hadn't heard those words before, and they struck her more deeply than she had expected. She had spent her entire life fulfilling the duties of a princess, a future queen, and the thought of being allowed to simply be was both exhilarating and terrifying. For the first time, someone was telling her she didn't have to be what the world expected of her, that she could be something more, something real. She didn't have to hide behind her mask. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke again. "But what if I can't? What if there's nothing left of me once the mask is gone? What if I don't know who I am anymore?" Her fear was palpable, raw, and Jace could feel it in the air between them. He could sense the deep uncertainty that lay beneath her composed exterior. She had been playing a role for so long, she didn't know how to stop. She didn't know how to let go. Jace reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. "You'll figure it out," he said. "One step at a time. I'm not going anywhere." He didn't know if his words were enough to ease her fear, but he hoped they might offer her some comfort. For a long time, they sat together in the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the air growing cooler as the night settled in. The stars began to emerge, one by one, like tiny pinpricks of light in the vast, dark sky. It was a moment of peace, a quiet stillness between two people who had been brought together by something larger than themselves. There were no grand declarations, no promises of what would come next. But in that moment, they both knew something important had shifted. The bond between them had deepened. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were no longer two strangers sharing the same space, but two souls who had found something real in each other. The future was still uncertain, and the road ahead was not without challenges. But for the first time, Jace saw hope in Valerie's eyes. It wasn't the hope of a princess fulfilling her duty. It was the hope of a woman, someone who had been hiding for so long, now willing to step into the light. And Jace knew that whatever came next, he would be there, walking beside her step by step as they both learned who they were meant to be. The days following their conversation in the garden were filled with a quiet anticipation. Valerie and Jace continued to spend time together, and though their bond had already deepened, neither of them truly knew what to do with it. The world around them was still shifting, changing, uncertain. The pressures of Valerie's royal duties remained, and Jace, a foreigner on a planet not his own, had little idea of what the future might hold for him. Yet there was something undeniable between them, something that neither could ignore, no matter how complicated the situation became. It was a bond that had begun in the most unusual of ways, but now it felt like something more, something vital and real. One evening, as the twin moons of Valara rose into the sky, painting the landscape with a soft silver glow, Jace found himself alone in his quarters. His mind wandered, filled with thoughts of Valari. The connection they had forged during the ceremony of unity had been unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was not merely the physical sensations that had affected him, though those were undeniable. What struck him most was how deeply he had come to understand her, not just as a princess, but as a person. Someone who had lived in a world of expectation, isolation, and duty, and who now found herself in the midst of something that was hard to define. For the first time, he felt truly connected to another human being, not because of shared experiences, but because of an unspoken understanding. Valari, too, had changed. She no longer seemed like the distant, untouchable royal that she had once been. Her presence had become less guarded, and Jace could sense the vulnerability that lay beneath her poised exterior. She no longer hid behind the mask that had once been a symbol of her isolation. Her eyes, once shrouded in secrecy, now shone with a new kind of light. It was a light born not of her royal status, but of something more personal, a glimmer of hope, of possibility. Yet, as much as she had changed, there was still a fear that lingered in her heart. The fear of what it meant to truly be free, to step away from everything she had been taught to be and become something new. Jace could see that she struggled with it, and it pained him to know that she had so much to offer the world, but feared stepping into the light. A few days later, Valerie sought him out in the royal courtyard, her steps light and purposeful. The queue. Evening sun was casting long shadows across the stone path, and the air was cool, crisp, a welcome change from the heat of the day. She approached him, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. Without speaking, she motioned for him to follow. Her and Jace, curious, obliged. They walked through the palace grounds in silence, past the grand gardens, the marble columns, and the vast halls that echoed with history. As they moved deeper into the heart of the palace, the sounds of the bustling city outside faded, and the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them. Eventually, they reached a secluded balcony that overlooked the sprawling capital city below. The view was breathtaking, the city lit up like 1,000 stars scattered across the land. It was a sight that had likely been seen by generations of royalty, but to Jace, it was new and mesmerizing. Valerie stood at the edge of the balcony, her gaze fixed on the horizon, the soft wind pulling at her hair. She didn't speak right away, and Jace, sensing that she had something important to say, waited patiently. Finally, Valerie broke the silence, her voice softer than it had ever been. "There's something I've been avoiding," she admitted, her shoulders tense as if she were about to reveal a painful truth. "The truth is, I've been running from myself. I've been so focused on fulfilling my duties as a princess, as a future queen, that I've forgotten who I really am. I've hidden behind that mask for so long, thinking it would protect me. But now, I realize I've been hiding from the very thing that could set me free." Her words hung in the air, between them, heavy with the weight of her confession. Jace stepped closer, his presence steady and unwavering. He understood her fear, perhaps more than anyone else ever could. "You don't have to be anyone other than yourself," he said gently. "You've been told who you should be your whole life. But now, it's time for you to decide who you want to be. And I'll be here, no matter what." Valerie turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, "scared of what will happen if I let go of the mask, if I stop playing the role I've been trained to play. What if no one accepts me for who I really am?" Jace's heart ached for her. He knew all too well the fear of not being accepted, of feeling like you had to hide your true self to fit in. He had struggled with it in his own way, trying to find his place in a world that often seemed indifferent to his existence. "You don't have to worry about that," he said, his voice firm. "The people who truly matter will accept you for who you are, and I promise, you don't have to do it alone." The words seemed to resonate with Valerie, and for the first time, She allowed herself to smile. A soft, tentative smile, but one that held more warmth than Jace had ever seen. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, if only for a moment. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and looked up at him with a sense of quiet determination. "I think I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now. "Ready to take off the mask, ready to be who I truly am." In that moment, something shifted between them. The bond they shared had always been strong, but now it felt deeper, more complete. It was no longer just a connection formed through circumstance. It was something they had both chosen. They were no longer two people caught in the web of expectations and fear. They had found each other, and in doing so, had found a piece of themselves that had been missing. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above them, Jace and Valerie stood together on the balcony. The city below them, a world full of possibilities. It was a new beginning, one filled with uncertainty, but also with hope. For the first time, they both understood that they were no longer bound by the roles they had been given, but by something stronger, something real. And whatever the future held, they would face it together, as equals, as two people who had learned to see each other for who they truly were. The journey ahead was still unknown, but Jace no longer felt lost. Valerie no longer felt trapped. Together, they would navigate the challenges that lay ahead, not as two strangers, but as partners, two souls united by a bond that no mask could ever hide.